This video could be called either if someone would have showed me this in the past before purchasing, let's compare what's uncomparable, or our way around, in which cases you should completely dismiss this out of your equation. I've ridden the V's for 4,000 kilometers or so, at the Garmin pedal aside, so I have something to say, and if that's interesting to you, just have a look what I will be telling you about these pedals. They have their own specific usage, so take a look. Alright, so first things first, why they should not be compared as apple to apple, simply because one is power meter, other is just a clipless pedal. Both are clipless, but these includes power meter. For that reason, it's not exactly correct to compare them, yet because these pedals are both clipless, they are kind of both on the same table. So for that reason, we will compare them. First things first is the size. You can see that the Garmin power meters are enormously huge. And by saying enormously, I literally mean it. Imagine you are riding your bike and the Garmin XC is almost twice bigger than the XTR. That means your clearance to the ground is significantly decreased. The reason why I know this is because these were installed to my Scott Spark, because bottom bracket on Scott Spark is pretty low by default. It was really casual situation to pedal stroke something on the ground, especially on the technical climbs. This is obviously noticeable when you are going with fully open position. So it's probably better to see it once than to hear multiple times. By now, suspension is fully open and you can see that the pedal is at this position. If the sag sets in, you can see that it comes even more down. Now consider it going on the suspension. That's how much it can change. So consider the obstacle on the ground and the clearance becomes nuts. Add the Garmin pedal aside and you get around 2 more millimeters closer towards the ground. So that's something. Leaving side question aside, let's just see the weight difference. The pair of XTR's pedals weighs around 300 grams, while the Garmin weighs close to 500. To be specific, it's around 450, so the power meters here adds a significant amount of weight. We covered two fundamental things, the size of the pedals as well as the weight. So it's expected that these will come out heavier, but at the same time, take a look at these pedal bodies. After around 4K of usage, those are pretty much worn out. Definitely can still ride with them and nothing is bad about that. But keep in mind that replacing one pedal body costs you around 200 euros, and if you want to replace the set, it costs you almost 300 euros or so just to replace the pedal bodies, because you can remove the spindles and even take them from your vectors, for example, and insert them into these. So the size and the weight matters, but because these are power meters, it's also important whether they do good job on calculating your power. So the batteries are added under these doors from a side. These are either two LA44 or one single piece of the battery, so you can see that those comes in a way. Based on my experience, these cover doors are not the best because you have to tighten them on the specific torque, so that's kind of minor thing, but whenever it's very wet, it tends to lose one or the other side. These are double-sided, so it's left and right pedal. Based on what I'm saying here, it comes towards the degree where those power meters, the weight and the size is not necessarily matters, but what I would suggest you to consider is where and how you're going to ride with those. If you're a heavy rider, you go on the full suspension bike, you have cranks which are 175 millimeters. I would strongly suggest not to go with this one unless your bottom bracket is really high compared to Scott Spark. Because when going on full suspension bike, specifically Scott Spark, the fully open position, the pedal body is just really high, and 175 cranks tend to hit the ground pretty often, especially on technical areas. So it's not like you can't ride them. I rode those pedals in Alpentour Trophy last year, and I mean, I survived it, but basically whenever you go into more technical areas, you have to make sure that you are not hitting anything on the ground, because there definitely been some occasions when I hit some roots or other obstacles on the ground. When you're just riding, you can take care of those things more attentively, but when you are racing, few times I kind of hit the ground and it almost cost me either a few positions here and there or almost a crash. So you don't want to experience that. But keep in mind that I'm not saying that those pedals are terrible. For example, I would say that they can be fitted on a hardtail bike or the gravel, unless you really want to make extra precautions of trying not to hit anything on the ground. And of course, if you want to go with XTRs, then you have to buy separate power meter, and that might be a tricky thing. That was exactly the reason why I initially went with Garmin pedals, because, well, very good way to exchange them between the bikes, but I guess it was only once or twice when I added them to other bikes. So that's just a premise and promise from the manufacturer, which not necessarily you're going to use, so keep that in mind when considering that. Apart from compatibility, availability, there are also some additional metrics from those power meters. For example, there are a measurement where we can compare the peak and the dead end spot of your power, so like in your pedal stroke, at which degree you start pushing, where it's your peak level, where it's dead ground. But I'm not exactly sure whether this data is specifically required for amateurs. Definitely not, I would say. There's additional one where it measures how far from the center your shoe goes, and it's kind of doesn't make much more sense on the MTB, because your cleats moving and they just doesn't make sense at all. Useless data in my opinion. Other thing is sitting or standing position, but if you are lightweight it won't work. So yeah, additional features which are nice on paper but not that nice when you actually start using and trying to make sense of them. That's something to think about if you need those features in the pedals or not. But again, if you went not with Garmin pedals and you went with XTR Clipless pedals, you need some power meter. That would be additional headache for you. But I would strongly suggest to consider taking something which would be simply cross-compatible with your other bikes in case if you need to make a swap. If you are a Shimano guy, I would suggest stage cycling, for example. If you're more into SRAM, then Quark can do the job. Why I would say it's important to stick with a manufacturer you love? Simply because if you go with other manufacturer power meters, which for example are 4 bolts or any asymmetric like mounting, then you have a hard time again to purchase the chain rings and all that stuff. So that's topic for a future, but considering that here we're talking about the clipless pedals, which one has power meters. So we're leaving power meters topic for a while, but I would strongly suggest to go with clipless pedals on full suspension bike without power meter of this size, simply because you will increase your ground clearance and that will be beneficial when you're going on fully open position. Of course, you don't necessarily have to go with XTRs. This is just an example. You can go with any other which are not bulky, and the bulkiness is kind of important for full suspension, right? Last but not least, I'm pretty sure that there are full suspension bikes which bottom bracket doesn't move in terms of ground clearance. So if that's the case, maybe Garmin pedals could be suitable for this type of situation. But if not, then unless you are very lightweight or you have shorter length cranks, I would suggest to go with not Garmin XC. Last but not least, if you have hardtail or gravel bike and you want to have that compatibility between multiple bikes very easily, just unscrew a bolt and that's kind of it, then these might be an option to consider. But because I'm riding full suspension Spark, I went with XTR pedals and XT Shimano with stage cycling, and I might also consider to upgrade it to XTRs as well, because, well, 100 grams less is not that bad, right? Weight weenie. Anyways, hope that this comparison was helpful. And yeah, if someone would have showed me this in the past before purchasing, I would strongly consider not to. But because I already did, I will have to play around with those for a while. And who knows, maybe I will fall in love with them. Probably not. Oh, and one other thing, they are pretty noisy. You can actually do the maintenance, it just separates itself, you can re-grease it, and actually in DC Raymaker's channel there is very good video about making maintenance of those bad boys. So that said, oh, and actually I remembered one other thing. You know that situation when you have two pedals and you are not exactly sure in which side each should go? Of course, there is some markup on the other side of a pedal, but considering that you are lazy and you don't know that it exists, there is a simpler way to do so. So you see that XTR writing? So basically you just switch the pedals in a way where you can clearly read the title. So here is the right one from the drive side position. So I'm writing this and I can see from the top XTR. Yeah, XTR from the top when it's spinning. Keep that in mind when installing the pedals. Maybe you have some eye problems and you can't see those small numbers without glasses, so that will be a game changer for you. That's it, thanks for the time and we'll meet in other videos. Cheers. Tight as hell lockout, exactly like it should be. So conclusion that if you're going to the warranty for nth time, then it's probably not the part's problem but yours, and you have to figure it out your own, because warranty can change the part but you are still going to get into the same trouble.